Thanks for joining us here on Mirror Now. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. Our top focus at this hour is on the issue of girl-child education in India, which has hit a new stumbling block. Amid the third wave, the COVID crisis has disproportionately hit girls' education. A Parliament panel report has red-flagged closure of schools, which has affected education of 32 crore students, which includes 13 crore girls. Now, according to government data, the dropout ratio of girls during the 2019-2020 was 15.1%. The panel has now called for urgent measures to prevent girls from poor families from being impacted by the closure of schools, and also points out to the lack of digital access. So girl-child education, like I said, is facing new challenges in this country. Even as the awareness over girl education has spread far and wide, now the pandemic-induced financial compulsions has proved to be a big setback. The parliamentary panel report has observed that in the post-pandemic scenario, the probability of more adolescent girls dropping out of school permanently to help with household tasks and childcare due to the economic hardships of the family is very high. So we are going to address this issue with our expert panel this evening. We are going to try and understand how can this be addressed. How can we incentivize girl education in this country at a time like this, which has become the need of the hour? Let me welcome Mr. Madhav Chavan, who's the CEO of Pratham, joining us here this evening. Also, Neha Jagtiani, Principal. I'm just going to, I'll just put out the names of the guests joining us here on the program. But Neha Jagtiani, Vice Principal of RD National College, I beg your pardon, also joining us. Let's first go across to my colleague Charlene, who is with us to take us through the facts and figures in this case. Charlene, if you can help us, understand things in the correct perspective, because I believe this parliamentary panel has put out some figures that illustrate the extent of the problem. Charlene.
That's right. Let me, in fact, just take you through the figures. Again, we've categorized our figures. This is the stages of the education level, and this is the rate. What this figure essentially means is that in their elementary class, which is the pre-primary section, for every 100 boys, you had 96 girls admitted in the classrooms. However, if you look at the secondary section, once the girl touches the teenage years, in their secondary section, this figure from 96 girls per 100 boys has dropped down to 76.93 per 100 boys. And now what's more worrisome is that this figure just gets worse. By the time they, girls reach higher secondary section, this figure has dropped down to 50.84. So now in a high secondary classroom, for every 100 boys, the ratio is 50 girls, which is higher during the elementary stage, but by the time it reaches the high secondary stage, there is a drastic drop. What the panel report has also pointed out that the overall drop rate, which is the national drop rate, is at a worrisome figure of 15.1%. Now, this is talking about the numbers, the worrisome numbers, as I mentioned. Let me also take you through the next slide as to what are the causes, what must have led to this, what educationists and policy makers are worried about is that lack of digital access to learning. So of course, during the pandemic, we've seen a boom of the use of technology for education, and of course the poverty group, which is the girls who are coming from that group, they have suffered the most because of lack of access to digital equipment. And then you also have a poor family background. Educationists are worried again of the burden of household responsibilities, because remember, the drop rate has actually drastically fallen from 96 to 50 in the secondary age group. That's when the girls hit their teenage years. And there is this perception in India that there is a rising burden of household responsibility by the time the girl touches teenage years. You have the third reason, closure of schools. Of course, several schools ran into losses during the pandemic, especially in the rural areas, and that led to the closure of schools. In fact, let me also take you through the next factor, which is the lack of hostel facilities. Another point that the panel report has flagged off is that we need more hostel facilities to promote and boost the education of the girl child. And our next point talks about the uncertainty of reopening of schools again. For many girl children out there, the families tend to think that because there is a cloud over reopening of schools, it is better for the girl child or for the female student to drop out by the time they've touched 15 and 16 years of age. So again, these are the various factors that have essentially led to the roadblock of girls' education in India.
Thank you so much, Charlene, for putting it out for us clearly. Let me go across to Mr. Madhav Chavan first. Mr. Chavan, at this point of time, as you heard my colleague detailing the issues that have been flagged off, it's a staggering figure, isn't it? The way the number is coming down from elementary to secondary to higher secondary, the enrollment is going down. That is one aspect. And the other aspect is the dropout. In many cases, for girls, the dropout is permanent.
I am skeptical about these figures. We have done surveys very recently in the states of Karnataka, Chhattisgarh. We've done a very large-scale nationwide survey. And from what we gather, we don't see this kind of dropping out of girls or boys. Whatever figures we get for boys, we also get for girls, especially in the age group of 6 to 14 and so on. So I'm surprised that such stark figures have been reported by the parliamentary panel. They could be right, but I really would like to check those figures. What we have seen to the extent of about 10 percentage points or so is that children, and I'm not saying girls or boys or maybe both, have moved from private schools to government schools. If private schools have shut down, or if there is no affordability, the girls may have moved or boys may have moved to government schools. But I doubt very much that people are not sending their children to school.
No, these are figures submitted by the Education Ministry, by the Union Education Ministry to the Parliament panel. But the fact of the matter is that even if we look at the overall picture, even if we do not do this distinction between the genders, isn't it worrisome that we have at a time like this an increasing number of school dropouts, and it is primarily financial difficulties induced by the pandemic?
I would really know. See, I got an invitation to join this show just about half an hour ago. These numbers are really shocking, as you say, and I would like to understand how the government, the parliamentary panelists come up with these numbers. Where are they coming from? And if the numbers are really correct. Because our understanding is that such a big thing is not happening in India at the moment. We could be wrong. I'm not claiming to be absolutely true and right and so on and so forth. But my understanding is that people are not dropping out. Schools have barely opened, not opened. So it's not a situation where you can come down with absolutely accurate figures. So I don't know how they've got these figures. DICE is not yet the best, and we are not in a situation where we can get accurate figures. So I'm not so sure. Yes, there are possibilities. When you talked earlier, you did mention the term possibility, probability of this happening. Yes, that I would agree with, that as schools open, and as the financial pinch starts showing itself even more starkly, it's possible that more girls will stay away from schools and not attend regularly. All those features are possible, and so we must guard against those. I'm not denying that at all. We need to do that. But to report these figures as they are today, I am a little skeptical.
No, even if it's a steady decline, this is not something that we can ignore. This is something that must be discussed and addressed. Where do you stand on this, Dr. Neha Jagtiani, on the issue of school dropouts, on the issue of pandemic-induced financial difficulties, the lack of digital access for bulk of school-going students across India? What have been your observations?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think it's time. Corona disconnected everybody externally, but technology can connect us internally. So it's very important that its citizens come forward and come forth at this time. So what we've done, for example, in our college, there are many, many affluent families who can have many of these mobile phones and devices which they are ready to discard, and it is not a big thing with them. So all our underprivileged students, and this is something which can be followed all across, can first and foremost give these devices. So all these students who are facing financial difficulties can get access to these devices, which will significantly bring down the dropout rate. Point number 2 is that as far as financial difficulties are concerned, as it is, the government is very sensitive towards girl child education. But apart from that, if we have, like, we tap our alumni and they sponsor fees. As a college, we allow them installments, though we are a government aided college and the fees are really low. But even then, we allow them installments. We tap our alumni, and we formed a conglomerate of alumni who's ready to sponsor the education of our students, whether they're boys or they're girls, so that these students don't have to drop out. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that an awareness can be created, because in my experience, I have observed that girls are very, very sincere and they do very well academically, not to take anything away from the boys, but most girls are very, very serious about their studies. So if an awareness can be created to the parents and the family, that if you educate your girl child, she will have a much better chance of growing in life, of achieving a lot of high aims or accolades for the family, and a day will come when she can support the family. I think we will be able to somewhat significantly reduce this problem. So, of course, pandemic has affected everybody, but it has also thrown open a plethora of opportunities that, in fact, because of digitization coming right in our faces, due to this pandemic, everybody has now become technologically advanced. You see the underprivileged, those who've never been to school, never been to college, all able to operate their mobile phones and all the devices. So in fact, it's an opportunity to take online education to the masses, right up to the rural areas where they have no access to schools or colleges or any formal education. We can look at this as an opportunity and tap the untapped potential of reaching education right up to the poorest of the poorer and right in the interior areas.
It is important that we build those systems, Dr. Neha Jagtiani. Unfortunately, we haven't taken major steps to initiate such a system. Like you said, it should reach the last child in the last village. That has not happened. And let me be very clear that this is a parliamentary panel which has made these observations. They have even identified the reasons why the girl child dropout is happening, because she is more likely to be the caregiver and the nurturer in the family. Her reasons for her to be sent back to school is far less than the boy, and those reasons exist in the real India, in the rural areas. What we have also got to understand is that because of the uncertainty of opening of schools as well, this problem has cropped up. But we leave it at that for now. Mr. Madhav Chavan and Dr. Neha Jagtiani, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Let's take a short break here. News and updates continue on the other side. Stay with us.